about the political dimension in terms of getting support from local councils? There's no doubt many of us are here feeling that rather than be the ally, sometimes the council is the enemy, not just in refusing to take on board good projects, but actually actively dispersing itself of its green space assets.
Well, just speaking from sort of a local council's perspective, I suppose, I think that it's fair to say that councils have been a barrier to innovation, and our rules and regulations and our bureaucracy and the ways that we've set ourselves up to run and manage things have sometimes stifled innovation, stifled new ways of thinking. And actually the concept of us giving up stuff in itself says how paternalistic we still feel about certain areas. However, I think a lot of that's changing. I think, you know, our politicians are very clear to the scale of challenge that faces them, and I think they are more prepared than ever, assuming there's a groundswell of opinion within the community, to actually take some risks and to try something that's a bit different and to try something that's a bit new. And I think the next round of cuts that face local public services is going to be a time where actually there's more opportunity than ever for innovation to flourish, and I think we just need to make sure it's something that we've gone into it with our eyes open, and that the politicians have gone into it with their eyes open in terms of what the value and outcomes might be.
That's very helpful, thank you, Fiona. I wonder if we might turn to a councillor for the political view. Thank you.
1, find an enthusiast among the councillors. 2, be their friend. Yeah, they're under a lot of pressure. I've been a councillor for 16 years. If they've just been elected and all of a sudden they're presented with the sort of challenges which officers have to present them with, they're under a lot of pressure. They need friends. See if they're a member of the governing group on the council, and it's best if your friend is a member of the governing group. See if you can encourage them either to be appointed to the cabinet, because that is where the power lies. The power lies in the cabinet positions. They're hugely powerful now. See if you can get them onto the cabinet, encourage them to aspire to be on the cabinet. Make sure, or try and also argue that you don't find, for argument's sake, sport in a different portfolio from parks, because most public sports facilities in parks, so if they're going to take a holistic approach, they're going to need to bear that in mind. Equally, I agree with what Camden's doing, and we're doing it as well. Make sure libraries are in with parks, because the parks are a big part of the historic environment. The libraries have the archives, so they can take a holistic approach. See if you can encourage them to be on the Health and Wellbeing Board, because the Health and Wellbeing Board is where some money is coming through. But the main thing is, find an enthusiast, be their friend.
Yeah, Laurent from Create Atmosphere. I just would like to know about the nighttime economy and opening parks at nighttime and how it's considered today, considering it's obviously a social space, and we tend to actually have entertainment during nighttime because we work during the day.
Well, this park, if I take that as an example, is in two parts, the North Park and the South Park. And the South Park was deliberately designed to be a 24/7 park. So the level of lights that we've got down there, the activities that we've got down there, and actually the fact that it sits alongside Westfield and the night-time economy there actually means that that park will be open the whole time. We took a different philosophy for this park and said, actually, this is a more naturalistic park. There are only 2 lit routes in this park, and we were going to close it at dawn to dusk. Interestingly, a lot of the local community, particularly local councillors, said actually the ability to be able to join up with local communities is far more important than actually the fact you've only got one lit route. So this northern park will also be a 24/7 park. And the same is true if you look at it, because this is a park split by a road, Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens. Hyde Park is there going until midnight every day of the year. Kensington Gardens close at dusk. And I think you have to think about the nature of the park, the activities that you want to do in it, and working with the community, ensure that you get the best measure for the park itself.
Thanks, Mark. My experience on the Olympic Park precedes Mark, so it's probably slightly more out of date, but the preliminary work by the Olympic Delivery Authority was looking at programming across the whole of the park as a framework. So a guy called Tim Marshall, who cut his teeth on shaping the restoration of Central Park in New York, wrote the Towards a 10-Year Management and Maintenance Plan. It precedes the work of the Legacy Company, but it is a document available on the Learning Legacy website, which you can download, and it actually looks at programming the park and ways that it could be done before the Legacy Company got ahead of steam across the seasons, across the months, the weeks and the days, so that it actually set a very clever choreography of different ways to program but to generate activity and generate funding. So I think that's a good example. I think when you look further afield, parks in the States, particularly parks in Paris, when they had that great flush in the 90s of investments such as Parc de la Villette, where they proactively program parks to work almost 24/7. So Parc de la Villette is the best model of a discontinuous building that was described, that provided elements in the park that will work throughout the day and in the evening, generating activity, interest and income particularly. So.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gibbons from Camden as well. I really want to ask about financial models for management of parks, particularly in the examples that we've heard about. There's been trusts mentioned, there's been people talking to me about different models, but actually what works and what doesn't, and is there anything new on the horizon that we should be thinking about?
And we're looking at everything really, and I think that's the reality that's facing us at the moment. Clearly parks and the planning requirements and regulations around parks are challenging for us in terms of different use. We are a very densely built up urban area. Parks are vital for people that don't have access to green space, don't have access to play opportunities or just to outdoor space where they can meet other people within that community. So I think it would be very, very much a last resort, and I think that there are many other things that we would want to look at before we ever considered closing a park, and I think that's about how we use parks in different ways, and how we innovate, I think, with the community, who have got some good ideas around, well, okay, we can manage this aspect of it. I think the issue of the nighttime economy is really critical for us. You know, do you start not locking parks? Do you get then associated problems of ASB and all of the other issues that arise, and how much risk can the council afford to take on all of that? So we're not ruling anything out. Hopefully today we'll come back with some very good ideas of some other models that might work for us, but I think closure really at this stage, unless there's better re-provision somewhere else, would have to be a last resort, and I'm sure it's a line that our politicians really wouldn't want to cross over.
We explore that a bit in the Rethinking Parks research report. I think there are a great range of examples from the States to look at. I think the States has developed a far greater and more sophisticated relationship between public and private sector. Philanthropy is very strong in the States, less so here, but I think they are exploring particularly taxation measures, mechanisms to share the value that parks give to a local neighbourhood, to reinvest back into the park. And I've flagged a few of those. They're described in more detail. There is a very useful document produced by New Yorkers for Parks that spells out a whole range of different financial models, particularly for funding parks in Manhattan. And so I think that's worth looking at. What's happening in the future? Well, I think the ecosystem services, the looking at new ways of valuing the environmental resource that parks offer, but the services that they perform, I think can only increase in sophistication. Payment for ecosystem services is acknowledged now by DEFRA as a model and explored technically by Natural England in their research work, that I think you can start putting values that in time will turn into real money, particularly, say, we've had flood risk management to start with as an example, but other ways in terms of carbon, urban cooling, better water management, a whole range of opportunities to use from the natural services that parks can perform if they're connected into a more sophisticated and fully functioning system.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on future models, and someone mentioned trusts. one of the challenges facing this park is London Legacy Development Corporation, for which I work, won't exist in 10 years' time. And we need to think through now who's going to be responsible for managing and operating the park at that time. I think trust is one of the options that's being considered. I mentioned we've got our own charity, and whether we grow that into a charitable trust that would, rather than focused on fundraising, actually became about managing and organising the park. I don't know whether anyone from Lee Valley Regional Park Authority are here, but actually we're actually sitting on their land at the moment. We lease from them, so that might be an option for taking over the park in the future. As might someone like the Royal Parks or the City of London or so on. Or you could give it up to the 4 local authorities who each have a part of the park within their boundary. And I won't give my personal view on whether that would be the right route to go or not. But actually, another thing I think we should consider is actually whether there should be a Greater London Park Authority. The GLA, which is the body which we at LLDC report to, also runs things like Barrier Park. They're responsible for appointing the board of the Royal Parks these days. Actually, why does one organisation need 3 different parks bodies running different parts of the city? So I don't know whether you could then draw in some of the local authority parks or not. I guess that's probably even further than a 10-year time frame. But it's a challenge that this park is currently facing, is who's going to run, manage and operate it in 10 years' time.